Well, it is not for nothing that Mary Shelley's novel Frankenstein begins in the Arctic. Why? The Arctic is an ice cape, of course. It is monotone, of course. It is a realm like, say, a desert or a flat, large body of water in which difference is compromised. It's a world in which wherever you look, you see pretty much the same thing. All difference is reduced to the same. And what is that but a figure for chaos? If order is the ability to make meaningful distinctions, then chaos is the inability to make meaningful distinctions. And if we find ourselves dropped in the midst of a vast ice field, we will be hard pressed to make meaningful distinctions. I say that this is appropriate, symbolically at least, because one of Victor Frankenstein's problems as a character is that he hates difference. Well, what do I mean by that? So, as he tells his story to Robert Walton, we get a Bildungsroman from him, a story on how his education formed him. We learn in the 1818 edition of the novel that his father finds an orphan. The orphan is brought to the Frankenstein household, and the Frankenstein household decides to adopt this orphan. She's named Elizabeth, of course. And Victor tells us that she became his plaything and that he called her cousin and she called him cousin. Now, the fact that he sees this person as a plaything is, of course, problematic, suggesting that he's sees her as kind of a commodity or an object that is merely there for his own pleasure. So he reduces her difference as a person to a kind of plaything that is an extension of his own pleasure. Furthermore, in calling her cousin, there's the faint hint of incest. Obviously, they do not share the same DNA. Obviously, they are not brother and sister, but they have a relationship as if they are related, and they behave as if they are related. And what is incest but a desire to replicate the same? An incestuous relationship is one that does not want to invite difference into the family line. We can think in this regard of Poe's story, The Fall of the House of Usher, where Roderick and Madeline Usher, brother and sister, look exactly alike. And we learned that in the Usher household, the Usher line, there's been no collateral issue, suggesting that there hasn't been much variation in the gene pool in that line. So Victor, with these two examples, shows himself as someone who wants to turn the other into the same, the different into the identical. Put another way, this is a man who is an egotist. He only values those experiences that somehow give him pleasure. Well, this seemingly innocent childhood habit, probably most children are egotistical, becomes dangerous when he doesn't really grow out of this egotism when he becomes an adult. His mother dies. He's heartbroken. He's very close to his mother. And he goes off to college soon after. Well, what does he do? He tries to come up with a way to overcome death. He hates death because, of course, death has taken away his beloved mother. It has compromised him. It has challenged his ascendancy. It has challenged the power of his ego. So he thinks, if I can remove death from the world, then I will no longer have to suffer the death of any other people I might love. But what do you do when you take away death? Obviously, the organic world functions on difference. You must have difference between life and death, growth and decay, day and night, light and dark, appetite and satisfaction, so on and so forth. The natural world functions through contrariety, polarity. So if you take one of the polarities away, what happens? You throw the whole system out of whack and you create a wasteland. And this, of course, is played out in that the creature that is issued from Victor's desire to overcome death is nothing but death. It is a killing machine. We, of course, know that the creature has a complicated psyche and he's tortured with guilt, but yet at the end of the day, this creature kills a lot of people. And it's quite ironic that Victor's desire to give himself great comfort through getting rid of death, in fact, he creates a kind of wasteland like the Arctic ice. where all difference is reduced to the same. Without the polarities that generate life, you have only death. So, one way to think about Victor's character in this regard is someone who, in his egotism, is horrified of anything other than his ego. Powers other than his ego compromise his sense of control, his sense of power. So it's interesting then that what does the creature want? The creature wants only difference in some ways. He wants to connect with an other. He's hungry to connect with other people, to move outside of himself, to escape his solitude, his isolation. Whereas Victor, who has multiple opportunities to connect with others, seems to care very little about these opportunities. For instance, when he's in college, he rarely writes his beloved family, basically shunning them. And even though he does ultimately marry Elizabeth on his honeymoon night, for some reason he can't imagine that the creature would go after Elizabeth to kill her. He's kind of blinded by his own ego, thinking, well, he'll surely come after me, but he goes after Elizabeth instead. And we might ask, well, if he really cared about Elizabeth, wouldn't he be more careful in trying to protect her? So I think this interplay between identity and difference is very important for thinking about Frankenstein, not only in terms of Victor's character, but also it's a way of thinking about the creature's character as well.